Hello viewers, good morning. This is National Orientation EEC River State, Nigeria. Welcome to a fresh edition of NOA River State Dialogue. NOA River State Dialogue is a live streaming program on Facebook. On this platform every Friday, 11 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. As part of our mandate, we bring discussions that inform, educate, and sensitize citizens on government policies, programs, and activities. And will also entertain feedback in form of comments, questions, and suggestions from our viewers. My name is Ellis Muriantapa, your host. Remember, this program is brought to you by National Orientation Agency with support from UNICEF. Last week Friday on this program, we discussed how we can combat COVID-19 through good sanitation and hygiene practices, the role of stakeholders and government in ensuring safe water, and the responsibility of citizens in maintaining a clean and hygienic environment. Today, in continuation of our program on risk communication and community engagement, which is the broad theme COVID-19 and child survival, we are going to discuss yet another interesting topic. Today's topic is COVID-19 and child-based violence. And in the house, I have with me two doctors. On my left, I have Dr. Betty Agala. Dr. Betty Agala is a medical doctor and the president, Medical Women Association of Nigeria, River State Branch. Madam, you are welcome to our program.
Thank you very much.
And on my right, I have Dr. Prince Wobo.
You are welcome.
But Dr. Prince Wobo is our Community Orientation and Mobilization Officer in charge of Obiakpo local government area. You are welcome. Yes, let's start. And Dr. Betty, I'm going to start with you. According to WHO, over 1 billion children experience violence each year. And children, when I'm talking about children, I'm talking about persons between 2 to 17 years of age. What are the things that can be categorized as child-based violence? What are those things?
Thank you very much. So, child-based violence, as we know, it's anything that can harm the child, whether physically, emotionally, psychologically. And you have tried to define who a child is, but might I say that anybody less than 18 years is a child, because we've had children less than 2 years that have been abused or that have experienced violence. I would like to, for the purpose of this discussion, to categorize child-based violence into 4 broad categories. And the first will be neglect. Neglect is when the basic rights of the child, the basic necessities of life that a child is supposed to have are not given to the child. So when a child does not have food to eat, when a child does not have clothes to wear, when a child does not have a home or a place to lay their head, when a child who is supposed to be in school is not in school, when a child does not have Medicare when they are ill, all those are neglect. A child lacking all of this is undergoing or is facing a form of violence you could categorize as neglect or negligence. Now, the second category will be physical violence. Physical violence involves physically abusing the child. So, hitting the child, flogging the child, slapping the child, using hot iron. We see all of those things, on the child. Anything that touches on the physical body of the child and can cause injury, that is categorized as physical abuse. And that happens a lot within the domestic environment of So you have a lot of domestic violence in that category. And then the third would also be emotional or psychological violence. This may not affect the child physically, but when caregivers or parents constantly and persistently abuse the child with words. So you're good for nothing. I don't know what's wrong with you. You're stupid. You can't amount to anything. Constantly talking to the child and reducing the self-worth and self-confidence of that child. Making the child feel unwanted and unneeded in that environment. That is another form of child-based abuse. And then, of course, the final one I want to talk about is sexual violence. And sexual violence ranges from not doing anything to doing, to actually defiling or raping the child. When I say not doing anything, some people may think that, oh, if you expose the child to like a fun movie, it's nothing, but that is a form of violence. So as much as anything you do with the child to bring up sexual, how would I call it, desire, or whether to give you or the child sexual satisfaction is a sexual abuse on the child, because the child at that age is not capable of consenting to such an act. So whether it's showing of pictures, exposing genitals, or it's watching of a movie, or it's touching the child, or it's masturbation, or it's actual rape or defilement, whether it's oral, whether it's vaginal, whether it's anal. Because when we talk about the child, let's remember that it's both the boy child and the girl child. So in a nutshell, those are the ways I want to categorize very common child-based violence. There are other forms of violence that children go through, especially the ones that have to do with female genital cutting and other institution-based violence. But I think we can work with the ones that we have talked about.
Yeah, I was about to ask you a question, but you answered it. I wanted to ask if child-based violence is peculiar to particular sex.
Yeah, so it's not peculiar. When we talk about child, a child is either a male child or a female child. And both children undergo or can go through and experience violence. But there are certain types of violence that are more prevalent or predominant in one gender than the other. So, but children can be neglected at home, whether it's male or it's female. Children can be abused, and even sexually. But we find that when it comes to sexual abuse, there are more girls than boys. When it comes to other physical abuse, maybe child labor, child marriage, all of those things, you find that child marriage will affect a girl child more than a boy. Child labor may perhaps be more of a boy, but it depends on a lot of things. But as we speak, a child is either a boy or a girl, and we're trying to be gender sensitive.
Thank you very much. Viewers, you can be part of this program by sending your comments, questions, or suggestions as the program progresses. Dr. Agala, thank you for much. What can be the causes of some of these child-based violence?
All right, so we'll try to extrapolate from what we have said as the different types, because from there you will see what could possibly cause it. So I want to say, for one, that poverty and ignorance is a major factor that that predisposes children to violence. So you look at a home, they are unable, and in all honesty, they are unable to provide the basic needs of the child. And that already brings that child to a state of neglect, right?
Yes.
So the child is exposed, he goes on the streets, he's exposed to a lot of other forms of violence, because in the home, probably he doesn't have food to eat or she doesn't have food to eat. So they go out and they could be exploited sexually or otherwise, child labor, whatever, because of poverty, because of ignorance. So lack of income comes under that, unemployment. So the head of the home, whoever it is frustrated. And when you're frustrated, you're likely to abuse the next person there. You think that the child is the cause of the problem. This child, since you came, things have not gone well and all that. That leads to a lot of psychological and emotional violence. So that environment already makes a child vulnerable to violence. And then of course you have substance abuse. So you have caregivers who abuse alcohol, who abuse tobacco, who abuse other substances. They are more likely to abuse the children around them. Yeah. And of course, in a home where there's already domestic violence, you know, that, I mean, it's right. You find child-based violence there, and of course, even in the future, as we will talk about it. Situations like we had, the I'm sure we'll get there, but the COVID, putting everybody together, you know, the child is not going to school. Yeah, so those are some of the things that could expose the child to violence.
Yeah, Dr. Prince, do you have anything to add?
Yes.
Before you add, also take this question: how has the COVID pandemic impacted on the violence against the child?
Yes, violence, as we all know.
She was trying to say something about it.
Violence has been there for decades. For the emergence of this novel COVID, it does appear to have been exacerbated by the present realities. I think that the impact of the violence has actually created in our society are much. You see, the prior before now, the violent prevention services and the response services are no longer made available. Those are no longer as pronounced as it used to be before. So they are a shortfall. And then one other impact that these violence are actually created in our society is the fact that it gives room for exploitation and abuse is on the increase. And then the children are leveraged on the fact that they are at home to engage in some kind of sexual economic survival. The parents send them away who are now at home by reason of the lockdown and then the restriction of movement. Go out there to sell to hawk. And as they hawk, believing the fact that there is nothing much at home to hold for to, they are exposed to all manner of things, sex and name them in order to make ends meet. So these are some of the impact. And then also the social workers and other services that are available before now is on the decline. And then that has also impacted negatively on the society and the children. So these are some of the impacts people notice because of the virus.
Do you have anything to add?
Yes, I wanted to say some of the things. I think outrightly some of our parents lack parenting skills, and it's a lot of us really. So because we don't know, and that's why we must appreciate the NOA that we are talking about this. Many people don't know that just talking down on the child can have some effect in the long term on the child. So it may just be out of ignorance or lack of skills to handle different kinds of children. And he has talked about people that normally would go out, they are there, they are stuck with the child. And of course, the forms of violence that are online, because children are now more with their devices because they are not in school. At some point, of course, they were not in school and they are home and all they have are devices, and you find out that there's a lot of violence online, actually attacking the sensitivities of the child. So all of this can actually expose children to violence.
So specifically, what are the impacts of the violence on the development of the child? Specifically, we have talked about the impact of COVID and all that on the development of the child. Because we understand that when we talk about violence, it's not just the physical, from what we said, physical attack on the child and all that.
So the violence, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, whether it's neglect, has far-reaching impact on the development of the child, and it actually will affect outcomes if nothing is done. So the cognition of the child, ability to remember, ability to memorize, to give attention, so you find in the short term that children that have been abused, sometimes if they were in school, their schoolwork begins to drop, their performance in school begins to drop. You have a child who was normally outgoing, smiling, the child is withdrawn. A child who had stopped bedwetting, for instance, you find that child going back. So it's like developmentally, the child has dropped to like a younger age or something, and the child is not behaving as well as it should behave at that age. There's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of mental, there's a lot of stress on the mental ability of that child. So anxiety, depression, it leads to use of substances, it leads to not doing well in school. I mean, if a child doesn't feel well, definitely the brain does not develop well. And so remember, we're talking about even children starting out very early to be exposed to violence. So we talk about just breastfeeding, doing something to the brain of the child and making the child do better. So imagine a child deprived of the love, the care, the food that they need. So there is a lot of strain on the mental, emotional, and psychological ability of a child that is abused. And this is carried on to adulthood. And that has been one of the issues, because you find these children also becoming perpetrators of violence. You find them angry at the system. You find them, unable to make meaningful progress until something is done about it.
Thank you. Let's go to our page and take some comments from our viewers. I have here Abie Senibo. Consistency is key. Well done, Edo River State. Bridget Idemio said the nuclear family has a major role to play as children learn by observation. A child who grows up in an abusive environment is likely to be an abusive adult based on the experience acquired at the early stage of development. We must not allow our children to waste away during the pandemic, but encourage them to make the best use of their time. That is from Bridget Idemi. You have talked about that. Ngozi Okechukwu has this to say child protection is critical at this second phase of COVID-19 pandemic. Remember, the vaccines are not available in Nigeria. And even when they are, vaccines at the moment do not cover for children under 16. Rosemary Abehat says, Doc, I don't know which of the doctors or the two doctors, you have made us to understand, you have made us to know the various type of child that is talking to you, Betty. Make us to know the various type of child-based violence. Please, what is the government doing to put a stop to this very criminal act? Because no child chooses who should be his or her parents or a child killer. Can we answer that?
Yeah, so everyone actually has a role. Everyone has a role. Government has their role, definitely, and we are always quick to run to what is the government doing. But what are we doing as individuals? What are we doing as citizens? For the government, they can put structures in place, they can put policies, they can bring up programs, but it is still left for individuals to respond to those programs. So for instance, for the child, world over and in Nigeria, we have adopted the Child Rights Act. And of course, River State, we have the Child Rights Law. And that law stipulates what the rights of the child is and what it is that would happen if there are violations of such rights. what instruments to use and what to do about that. Now, government has done their bit by putting those structures in place.
Yes.
We're not talking about how functional these structures are, but at least there are structures in place.
Okay.
So, and then there are organs of government, whether it's the police to make sure that there's security. You have, someone mentioned the social welfare to ensure that children are taken care of, as the need arises. There is the legal system to prosecute if there is need for that. So government's role is to put these things in place.
Okay, let's go to Peter Ikabi. So government should provide social service network to salvage the difficulties created by the COVID-19 pandemic. Then another person, Bibiba Princewell, say good morning anyway rivers. The issue of child abuse, child-based violence is on the increase, where parents or child givers physically injure their children or work for just a little mistake. Such persons should be arrested and persecuted. Let me come in here. We have seen that in many of these abuses, the perpetrators go home free. So this Bibiba principle is suggesting that people who are guilty of this offense should be arrested and persecuted.
People are arrested and are persecuted. But it might interest you to know that the people that perpetrate violence are usually the people that the children trust much more than, it will be difficult for a stranger to hit your child. Most times the child is abused within the context of the home. We know that there are children out there on the street, children of the street, children in the street that face some other forms of violence. But more often than not, their parents, their uncles, their neighbors, there are people that these children know and are able to trust, and then they lure them and betray this trust in whatever form.
So who will the child trust?
So the thing is, and that brings us to what everyone can do. Remember I said government has their role, but government is not in your house, government is not in your neighborhood. You are there. When you see something, you must say something. Because you now know that there are structures in place, then you have to report. So we start with parents knowing what is right and ensuring that their children are not abused as much as possible within the home. And then the next thing will be to make sure that you put your eye there to see what your child is doing. If your child comes back from school with sweets, did you give her money to buy the sweet? How did she get it? You must look in to ensure that you know where your child is getting things from. Because someone is probably taking something from her and giving her those things. So as parents, as caregivers, we need to look in. And all of us will stop doing it's not my business. It is our business. We now have to go back to being our brother's keeper, to be, instead of videoing something and posting it, actually doing something about it.
Okay.
So those are roles we can play. And there are structures, like I said, people can be arrested. And that's where the police comes in. So you must report for an arrest to be made, because they have to investigate, and it's a long process. You investigate, you ensure that someone actually did commit a crime, you prosecute, and then you put that person behind bars or whatever the punishment stipulates. So there are things to be done, and of course, beyond putting that person away, that child still needs the welfare and all the gamut of things to keep the child
Okay. Talking about arresting and prosecuting perpetrators, what do you think are the difficulties citizens face?
The difficulties, I think that the very fact where violence will be eradicated to some extent, or taken care of, lies solely within the family circle. Because if your child, within the confines of the family and society, you are aware there are issues where he or she may have deviated or is acting wrongly, it is the onus is on you to call back the child, tutor him or her on how well to behave. But then outside of the family environment, an outsider might find it difficult to really want to maybe spank your child or correct her or even report such issue to police. But I think that the government should do further by enacting a policy that will protect people from outside the family. Assuming if the case is reported to the police, there won't be any fallback as in maybe coming from the parents. I want to report my child, taking up issue personally with such person. And so if nothing is done at that level, it will be difficult to actually combat this. Because if it is not my child, I'm just passing by and I'm seeing a child being abused or acting abusively, sort of, you will find it difficult to call the police or to report to any agency responsible for that.
So
if there are,
can I come in here?
Yeah.
You don't find it difficult to call because it can be an anonymous call. And the NGOs and people that work in this space, they know well to protect you. So you don't say you will be, something could happen. No. You place a call and say, so because you know why I'm saying this, because we have intervened in several issues that a neighbor from somewhere, they just describe the place, and then you go and you look at what's happening. So I want to say here to everybody watching that it's okay to make a call. It's okay to call their attention. You don't need to go and tell the mother, I am going to report you.
It's okay. It's okay. You see,
what I'm driving at, basically, you're right by talking about the anonymous caller. But the literacy level, at some point, could inhibit, or most persons don't know that such things could be done just for purposes of, like we were trying to, go to the public, enlighten them on what they should do. Those persons are held down by reason of what I just said.
that is one of the things we are going to do today. Before we leave here, we would like to get some numbers. Now, almost everybody has a phone. We will give some numbers out that people can also make calls to make a change. Before we go on, let me also check our platform to read some comments. Leka Emeju. Leka said parents should do all that is necessary within their reach to keep their children safe. All forms of violence should be eradicated. Femia said child-based violence reduces performance of the child. We have said something about that. Our time is going. Can we, apart from Dr. Veti, apart from the police, that is law enforcement agencies, do we have other institutions or bodies for people to make requests? Apart from going to the police, other bodies that can help. We are talking to the public,
Yes,
so they can also avail themselves.
So when we talk about the effects, I know we zeroed in on the cognitive and the developmental effects of child abuse, but there are a myriad of physical injuries, sexual-based injuries, infections, and all of that. So that brings us to the fact that beyond police, of course, they need Medicare. And that's usually the first thing that parents would want attended to, or anybody for that matter, to make sure that the child is physically healthy. You know, if a child has been sexually abused, you want to take the child to the hospital. Because also you are able to gather evidence for the investigation and the process going forward. So the health institutions are also important in the response. And in that area, we have the Doctors Without Borders that support, especially for the sexual gender-based violence, and then of course the Medical Women's Association of Nigeria, River State Branch. We also help out with the help. Then you have legal institutions. We have the courts and the judiciary and all of that. But we also have the Association of Women Lawyers, which is the FIDA, Federation of Women Lawyers. Then we have the African Women Lawyers Association, OLA. They also provide legal support because sometimes these people need representation and they cannot pay for it.
Okay, our time is fast spent. We are running out of time. Let me take this last. We have so many comments here. Let me take this last one. This one is from Young Ayatama. He said the protection of the child is the business of all. However, charity, especially the love for the child, must deliberately be cultivated to begin at home. I think you tried to say something like that we should love our children. Because you have also told us that when we talk about child-based violence, these violence are perpetrated by people the children trust. the mother, how do we survive it? When the people who were the children not trust. Just one minute before we go to the last question, our time is up.
Yeah, so we did in 2016 also, we worked with the NSROP, and there was this paper we brought out, abuse of trust. So the thing we are doing here is actually letting everybody know. Like I said, most parents don't even know that abuse, children take it so personal. So from knowing, then you begin to make conscious effort not to do the wrong thing.
Okay.
So the children have no one to fall back on if the people that they trust are the ones abusing them. And that's what leaves the lasting effect on their mindset and how they behave going forward. So what I can say is that everyone has a role, and we should start where we are to begin to change.
Dr. Betty Agana, it's like we bring you back to this studio. Time is not our friend. For the last one, this very first one, are there numbers people can call to report cases of violence against children? Very first one.
Yeah, so I have 2 numbers at least. And you can reach Fida Rivers, and they're on Facebook. You can reach M1, they're on Facebook. But I'll just put down 2 numbers. Any of the numbers you can get will be fine. So the first is 081-280-75881. 081-280-75881. And then the second is 090-2576-4565. I think those numbers can be posted on the Facebook platform, and then people can always reach us from there. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Betty Agala. I'm sure you oblige us when you call again to appear here.
Of course.
Thank you very much, Dr. Penis. It's been a nice time with you. Special thanks to all our viewers. It's been a wonderful time with all of you over there. This program will continue next week Friday, same time, same platform, with another interesting topic, also on child survival. To be part of this program, go to Facebook, search for Anyway Rivers, and when you find it, click on the like button and you'll be streaming live with us. Always keep a date with us. And remember, COVID-19 is real, and the second wave is more dangerous than the first. When the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine will arrive in Nigeria, take advantage and be vaccinated. We've been assured that it is safe. Take responsibility for the protection of all, and do the right thing by obeying all COVID-19 protective protocols and guidelines. Love Nigeria. Be patriotic. Do your part to keep Nigeria safe and secure. Remain blessed. This program is brought to you by National Orientation Agency, Rivers State, with support from UNICEF. Bye for now. See you next week. Thank you.